Good morning. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank you all for being here today. I'd like to welcome you to the Distinguished Lecture Series, which celebrates the 60th anniversary of the College of Business and Economics here at W.Va. It's a real honor for our university to host one of the greatest leaders and one of the greatest innovators literally in the entire world. And luckily for us, he happens to be an alum of our great university. We are so proud that West Virginia and West Virginia University are important pieces of the John Chambers story. John earned his bachelor's degree in economics and his law degree from WVU. He also received an honorary doctorate from WVU. In serving Cisco Systems since 1995 as president and CEO, and then as chairman and CEO, John Chambers built a company known for being the world leader in networking and innovation for the internet. I want you to think about this statement for a minute. Business Week magazine once said that nobody is more responsible for laying the foundation of e-business than John Chambers. Think about that comment for just a minute, and think about all the e-business transactions that you do, and all the e-business transactions that are literally done every single day around the globe. That is truly an amazing comment. John has been named the best boss in America and CEO of the year, along with too many other awards to name. In addition, he is also a leader in corporate social responsibility and philanthropy, and he has been incredibly generous in his support to our great university. Through his drive, his visionary leadership, his character, his generosity, his commitment to innovation, and his ability to somehow see the future, John Chambers is an outstanding role model for all of our students, no matter what your major is. For our students, I want you to think about this for a minute. He sat in some of the very same classrooms where you are attending your classes this semester. And one day, you will walk the same stage for graduation where he walked for his graduation. His life is a testament to the combination of hard work, education, and strong ethics. I cannot say enough about the kind of person that John Chambers is. He is literally a rock star in business and technology, and he is truly a kind and caring and wonderful person. Bringing great business leaders to our campus to interact with students is just one way the College of Business and Economics is preparing the next generation of business leaders. I would like to thank Wells Fargo for supporting this speaker series. I would also like to thank Dean Zito Sartorelli for his leadership and his great vision for the college. As a former business executive, Dean Sartorelli is making sure our students have what it takes to compete in the global marketplace. Dean Sartorelli will introduce my good friend, our distinguished speaker, and one of the greatest mountaineers of all time. But now, would you please help me welcome Dean Zito Sartorelli. Dean.
I have two options. One is to have a very extensive speech, which I'm not going to do, and a very short one. And I think, first of all, I want to welcome everyone to this event today. It's very special. It's a full house. In fact, we've got a bunch of people standing, and I think this is very special for our native son to come back home and to share with us his vision, his leadership skills. And you know what? I've been in business. I was in business for 30 years. And I can tell you, to move a company from $70 million to 45 plus. And at one point, as I understand, John, Cisco was the most valued company in the world in terms of market capitalization. Not an easy task. It takes brains, it takes leadership skills, it takes developing people, it takes all kinds of things. And I think John is just one of those guys that just embodies that, just embodies it. I have had the pleasure of meeting John at least 2 or 3 times, and I also have had the pleasure to meet his father, who is here with us today. And I want to acknowledge Jack, and Jack has been just this monumental person helping me, introducing me to a lot of people in the state. Thank you very much, Jack. So since you really want to hear from the main man, John, please.
Steve, it's a pleasure. It's a great honor in many ways to return home. And I think very often in life, you don't realize how lucky you were to be at the right spot at the right time at a great university, and to you watch what happens to you later in life because of that. A leader absolutely gets more credit than he or she deserves when things go well, and perhaps when things go bumpy, a little bit more criticism. But that's what leadership is about. For those of you who are going into business, how many of you are either in business or going into business? Don't let the highs fool you. Not quite as good as we think we are when we get there. And it's actually how you handle the challenges that determine who you are in life, not how you handle the successes. My goal today is to kind of share some lessons learned, mistakes made. If you agree with everything I say, I will have failed miserably. My goal is just to share with you, much like if I were a student today or a business leader in this state, what would I want to know, both what people have done, but equally important, what mistakes have you made and what did you learn from it as you move forward? As I grew up, my dad and mom that I'm very, very proud of, my grandparents were educated here at West Virginia. All of my family is educated here. My two brother-in-laws were educated here. One of them is the CEO of a pharmacy company in the West Coast. The other is the CEO of the North Carolina healthcare system. My niece was educated here. To say we're West Virginians would be an understatement. But I think many times people don't realize at the heart of this state is this university. And not to put any pressure on you, Jim, it is so important how we go and how we go as a university that determines the future of our state. It is education's the equalizer in life, and what has changed since then, it's now about not just education, it's about the internet. Because before, if you weren't in the right town, Dad, or the right location, you didn't have a chance to get ahead in life. The internet takes away times and borders. That's both good news and bad news. It means everyone in the world can be your friend, Facebook, everyone can be your competitor. So when you look at the university, many times people don't realize how intertwined developing well-rounded students are. I live about 5 miles from Stanford, and a lot of people talk about it as the best entrepreneurial school in the world. It probably is. About 153 companies, a fourth of them were Stanford Union exports. But they found from the beginning the importance of having great sports programs combined with great academics. And as a result, they got a well-rounded group. Wasn't that a good score? What does that show you? We can compete with anyone every time. Don't ever forget it. As I travel around the world, there are lots of CEOs out of West Virginia, lots of other people. As I was coming down here to speak, and I met with a lot of people in New York, one of the customers I met with said, John, my son called up and asked, do you know this Chambers guy? And he said, yes. He said, should I go listen to him talk? And he said, well, I think you should. But he said, Dad, it's at 9 o'clock in the morning. And Thursday night is a good night here at the university. And so it does speak that things have not changed. I would have had trouble getting up at 9 o'clock as well. But if you get one concept from me today, I will have done my job. Anything I say today, and this shows you, Jim, that my 3 years of law school was very appropriately applied, should not be interpreted about any comments about how my quarter is going or how next quarter will go. So, Dad, that was an expensive 3 years, and I thank you. But what I really want to talk about is often people lose track of, Oliver, how you doing? Often people lose track of what really makes a difference in a company and how important it is to decide what is your core values, but what makes you different and stay with it. And at Cisco, people often say we see around corners. And perhaps we do see things 2 to 4 quarters ahead of other people, sometimes 5 years ahead. But the way we do that is we focus not on competition, because if you're looking at competition, you're driving down a West Virginia road with ice, very curvy, and if you're looking out your rearview mirror, you're off that road. You want to identify where is the market going. What are the transitions? What's relevant to you? Then you get very close to your customers, and your customers will say, how do you put these events into context on where it goes? And when you intersect that too, that's what innovation's about. And as simple as that sounds, that's what we do that probably 250 of our competitors have not done. So it is beginning to get back to the basics. It's much like a great sports team. It starts with basic tackling and blocking in terms of the direction. Now, if you look at the changes going on in the world compared to when I was here, it's much more complex. You can either sit there and say, boy, I wish it was different, or you can do with what my two parents taught me early on, who are both doctors. Don't focus on the symptoms. Focus on the issues, turn them into opportunities. The global economy has probably never been more uncertain and more challenging. Competition's probably never been more severe. New competitors come at you with a tremendous speed. The problems in Europe, no one knows for sure. Is that going to spread around the world? Emerging markets are slowing a little bit. But the point that I'm making is you can either look at that as a challenge, and it also applies to each one of us in a business, in a town here in West Virginia, or you can look at it as an opportunity. To use some examples, and it isn't so important about technology here. It's about how you identify changes and then apply them based on what your customers say. And I've just spent 4 days in New York City listening to government leaders, business leaders from around the world. And if you combine those two, they will tell you exactly what you can do and exactly where the opportunities are. Big data is tremendously exciting. It's going to be the front-end component part of a lot of changes in life. This cloud will allow you to access information from anywhere over the world. The PC, unfortunately, is dead. It's going to go to a tablet. It's going to go to smartphones. If you look at what is going to occur, video will be our primary way of communications. I have 4 major video stations in my house that tie off any TV to be able to communicate anywhere in the world. I asked my wife if it would be okay to put one in the bedroom. She said, don't even think about it. A little bit of humor. My humor hasn't got any better since I was here. But I do believe in one thing, which is any time that you interface to people, you treat people like you'd like to be treated yourself. And humor relaxes people. And when you talk about humor or jokes, make them about yourself. That lowers the risk and gets the message across. And so all the way along today, I'll be sharing with you things that I would like to have known being in business school, or what, when I went to Silicon Valley, a guy by the name of Lou Platt at HP taught me. They were the original Silicon Valley startup. I went over and asked him, would he help me? We were 400 people, 70 million in sales. He met with me every quarter for 3 years. I never asked him why. And at the end of the 3 years, we were off and running. We were well on our way to being a billion-dollar company. I said, why did you do it? He said, it's the Silicon Valley way. I said, what can I give you back? He said, do it for the next generation. And as basic as that sounds, that's what Silicon Valley does better than any other place in the world. It identifies what is possible, has an ability to dream, and no fear. We think we're going to change the world. And we will. Power of positive thoughts, then hard work and anticipation behind it. It's the ability, when you think about leadership, we often think of a leader who stays the course, like a Churchill, or somebody who reinvents, like an Einstein, or somebody that knows when you just might need to adjust a little bit, like a President Clinton. Leadership is about knowing how to do all those together, and knowing when you stay the course in your business, when you have to adjust, or when you have to take a step back and say, either the market changed on me, or what we were doing was just not working. And if I were to take one thing away from today, that would be the second lesson I would take away. The first one is your success as a leader, more than anything else, is based upon the team you build and how you treat them. So if you look at where we're going to go, you want to, as a company, set out a strategy that you understand. The mistake that all of us make in business leadership, we jump right into something and we start on transactions. It's like a chess game. You want to figure out the chess game before you make your first move. You want to anticipate the moves of your peers. You want to get those market transitions right. You want to say, what's the press release 3 to 5 years out after you win this chess game? You want to understand it will never move the way you expect. You've got to have the ability to adjust during that. If it's going well, stay the course. If you get outflanked, then you've got to really reinvent. And you want to think of it as tremendously stimulating, not something that keeps you up at night. Look at it as fun, and it should be the most challenging win. Toughest times, and that's when you actually break away. We gain very little market share from our peers during the good times. It's during the economic downturns, the market transitions that occur. So for us, as basic as it sounds, we basically are going to take technology and tie the pieces from that individual access point, that tablet, if you will, all the way through intelligent networks, fixed and mobiles, all the way into the data center, the cloud, and we're going to solve the leaders' problems in terms of job creation, productivity in companies, how you interface to your customers. So it is that vision that set us aside from our peers. So if you think about where you're going to go, And back to the issue of market transitions, and again, I'm using this example. These occur in every industry. We were a router company, we were very proud of it. We didn't even understand switching. All of a sudden, two companies, Ford and Boeing, said, John, switching is going to really take off. And I said, okay. And they said, it isn't going to be this type of switching called ATM. It's going to be fast Ethernet. That's what Ford told me. I went to Boeing, and they said, John, we think your routing needs to change. And I said, you're right. We probably need to think about switching. They said, how'd you know? I said, I listened. And then I said, it's not going to be ATM, it's going to be fast Ethernet. And they said, yes. Can I get the order, please, now? And you know what they said? You have to go buy this company. That was our first acquisition. And when we did it, we understood that 90% of acquisitions in our industry fail. It's all about understanding what you acquire and protecting that at all cost. When a bank buys another bank, they're buying customer sets and geography, very rarely people. When I buy a company, often $1 billion for something with 100 people in it, I'm buying next generation products and the people. We literally went through this, and each time we caught a transition, simple concept, when all of a sudden voice moved into the internet, in other words, it moved from circuit to packet, it meant that everything was going to go over the internet. And as simple as that sounds, my biggest peers, who were many times our size, Alcatel, Lucent, Nortel, Ericsson, Siemens, well-run companies, did not get that transition. We moved into telephony. They said Cisco can't even spell it. They may have been right, but we got 65% market share, and we left our peers behind. Now, don't misunderstand. There is no entitlement in this industry. It's Spartan. It's about how you compete, how you treat people, and how you build your leadership team. I could walk you through examples after examples, the new frontiers around video, but the exciting new frontiers around the Internet of Everything. Only 0.2% of everything in this world is connected. As you begin to connect it, it will change healthcare, the environment, productivity, in ways that you just can't even imagine. Even in the pills will be connected. It will extend our life, and it will improve our healthcare system. So each time one of these transitions occur, we take a step back, say, how do we go about it? And we either do it ourselves, we partner or acquire to get there. The Internet of Everything. We just finished the Olympics. We were the infrastructure for it. For me, in technical terms, it was so exciting. 2,200 wireless LANs, 80,000 data ports, 16,500 IP phones. You know what I'm saying? That's boring. What we did was broadcast the Olympics with NBC to 4.2 billion people around the world, to any device, anytime, in any way. And with Prime Minister Cameron, the Prime Minister of the UK, it wasn't about putting on the Olympics. That was important. But when I met with him 18 months before, he said, John, we want to use the Olympics as the vehicle to completely change in the UK the ideas of innovation and direction. And he outlined that he wanted us to help him on education, and we wrote the textbooks for math and science for high schoolers and put everything in the textbooks around math and science, around technology related to the Olympics, how when you run, how the neutrons fire, etc. We took East London, which is the toughest area there, and we found that if you give young people a chance, regardless of their income level, or regardless of their socioeconomic or their religious area, they can compete with anyone. So we focused on East London. They said they needed innovation centers. We built 10 of them around the country, and we united them together for small startups. The point that I'm making is we can change a country. Now, I could walk through and give you the exact same example in Canada, which is the best place to do business in the world with Harper, or even in Russia with Medvedev and Putin, or in the Middle East and Palestine, Israel, Jordan. Key is you take the technology, you change people's lives, you create jobs, you make them competitive on a global basis. And no government in the world, what's the most important form of politics? A good economy and a large middle class. And so as you think about where this is going, you will see how this changes everything. Smart grids will connect to your home. You basically will have the capability off of an IP pole router to monitor not just your electricity, but you can pay a little bit more for a little bit cleaner energy. But once that's in place, everything can go over that. And again, it's the transition concept that I'm after. Now, since it is the year of the Olympics, in our industry, most companies have one or two products, and if they're lucky, they're the number one player or number two. We have 18 major products. Our philosophy is we do not enter a market unless we can be the number one player or number two. We target a minimum of 40% market share because you can get disrupted so easy. And then we made the biggest investment and bet in our industry. We bet that every device would be tied together, not by a systems integrator, but uniquely in a seamless fashion. Then we took the courage and said, over a decade to do this, even though everybody in the world second-guessed us, we said, take that architecture and you can solve the world's most complex business and governmental issues, including unemployment and education. And that's what we did. What enabled us to do that? Education. West Virginia prepares you amazing, and you can compete with anyone in the world. And I wouldn't say compete. You can compete and win. And I apologize for being super competitive. Not only win, you can win by a long way. And you've got to know that as a leader, because your team will know when you shake or not. They'll know when you have the confidence. And you want to, as a leader, know what you know and know what you don't. You don't have to admit you don't know it. You just have to get people around you who know the topics that you don't. My industry is brutal. Silicon Valley moves us at the pace. What the automotive industry went through in 30 years, Silicon Valley goes through in 2. And over this time period, I met one of my colleagues from Ford here. Ford was a great competitor. But if you go back 15 to 20 years ago, there were the 4 horsemen in my industry, probably 40 to 50 other companies, great startups, et cetera. You know how many of them exist today? None. 10 to 15 years ago, Ford and others, great competitors, great technology. You know how many exist today? 1, Juniper. And we're going to leave them way behind this year. 5 to 10 years ago, Lucent, Alcatel, Siemens, you know where I'm going. If you don't know when to stay the course, when to adjust, when to reinvent, you get left behind. And our industry does it in 2-year increments. So rather than worrying about an industry that changes rapidly, and this will go through every industry, including automotive, manufacturing, chemical, distribution, supply chain, it's getting comfortable with the change. How many of you like change? Good. How many of you are married in the room? Have you ever thought about changing your spouse? The first reaction is nervous laughter. The second, she's very red. And the point that I'm making, that's the person you probably trust most in life. And even the thought of teasing about changing that person makes you uncomfortable. And yet you have to develop as a leader the ability for you to change and lead by example for your entire organization. 2 years ago, people questioned, once again, were we a company that was going to get left behind and become one of those numbers up on the chart? At that time, we needed to do a combination, stay the course. The areas we need to adjust in, and there were a couple areas, especially operations, we need to reinvent ourselves in. Then your key is as a leader, especially if you know it's going to be a long, tough haul, especially if the press is beating the tar out of you at the same time, you've got to outline a vision. Be realistic on how much of it is macro, how much is self-inflicted, how long is it going to take, how deep it's going to be. It will be longer usually and deeper than you think. React once if you can. Paint the picture for your employees, for your customers, for your shareholders, what it looks like at the end, and then get closer to customers. This was halfway through that cycle. This was my way of communicating to our employees, even though we were being challenged. Look what our peers were doing. And look how in the 1 year where we were criticized, probably the second hardest in our history, how we listened, we adjusted, and we just started to turn up. This is what it looked like 12 months later. Every major big hardware player in the industry, software players like SAP down 2%, IBM down 3%, Intel down 8%. And the point that I'm making is how you handle these transitions determine where you go. What the other tough message here is, this is stock appreciation or not, my industry has not grown in years. If your stock goes up, it's because you took it from someone else. So it's the ability to be realistic where you are. What do I worry about? Or put a different way, what are the challenges? The global economy, no one knows. And this is not information about my quarter or anything unique on the quarter, but having just come out of the Clinton Global Initiative, having met with most of the large financial institutions in the world when I was in New York this last week, et cetera, Europe's going to be tough. Probably going to get tougher before it gets better. Emerging markets appear to be slowing, according to most customers in the world. Asia Pacific, even China, is challenged. If China gets in trouble, we all got in big trouble, because they're 50% of the available market in terms of all emerging countries. It comes down to the U.S. If the U.S. can lead us out of this, then we're on our way. If the U.S. doesn't, we're going to have a couple tough years in the global economy. Second thing is, business leaders, when there's unpredictability, whether it's taxes or whether it's economies or other issues, what do? They take their foot off the gas, and at a minimum they pause. More often they hit the brakes. That's self-fulfilling, because if business leaders don't invest in people, don't invest in technology, you will go into an economic slowdown. Our peers and competitors, I've got to be very realistic. When your biggest peers who are over 40, 50 billion in sales, and good companies like HP are shrinking by 5%, and Dell are shrinking by 8%, and Intel by 8%, and SAP by 2%, and IBM by 3%, there's something really wrong in the market. And so while we're proud to grow 4 to 6% is what we gave the advice to the market, and we grew 4% last quarter, we have to be realistic. We could be tripped up as well in trying to navigate through that, and being honest with your shareholders that this could happen. Leadership. This is what I evaluate my team on. What's the number one decision that you have to make in terms of leadership? If you only do one thing well, develop a good team. However, I never get confused. Hard work and good intentions, it's about results. But your ability to get results ties straight to the team that you build and how you motivate them. Within that, it is about knowledge in your industry. And it isn't, if you're a finance person, you don't need to understand your industry. You've got to understand it well at all levels, because the interdependencies become too great. Communication skills is so key. It didn't matter as much for your parents' generation or the generation before that. What's the most important thing about communication skills?
Be able to talk, be able to understand people and listen to them as well.
You got it, listen. What's the hardest thing for leaders to do? Listen. And what has changed dramatically, whoops, I must have been holding on to the chart there, is culture. And if you think about what I try to do as a leader, I only have 4 things. Vision and strategy for the company, develop, recruit, and retain the leaders to implement that, and culture. And when I went into the job, I didn't realize how important that was, regardless of the size of your company. Those companies who survive and prosper have unusually strong cultures. And the leader's job is to lead by example in that culture, to communicate it and stand by it, and make no mistake about it. The culture difference between an Oracle, a Microsoft, Cisco, and Intel is night and day. But they all have strong cultures with it. And it's the ability to communicate all of the above. Now, what I expect out of my team, collaborative skills is the new, not just inward, that's where all the productivity is going to come from. Web 2.0 type of skills. The ability in each thing you do to outline where you want to be 3 to 5 years out. Write the press release for your department. Say, here's how we're going to get there. Here are the key milestones as we move forward. It's easy to stand in front of you, but whenever I'm with leaders, I always ask lessons learned. Shimon Peres, 17 years ago, he said, John, leadership is tremendously lonely. Lonely? I got 40,000 people around me. What do you mean? When it gets tough, you're by yourself. Understand that as a leader. And develop contacts that you trust among your peers so that when that does get tough, you can give a Jack Welch a call or a Sandy Weld and say, how do you handle this? It's the ability also to realize that it often looks darkest just before victory. That's when you don't panic. That most companies do panic. And once my competitors panic, I got them. But know it's about victory, or you're about to go off a cliff and you have to reinvent. Sorry, this is hair trigger. I have a weakness for listening to people who are very smooth and very intelligent. You want to watch who can really operate and do well. And if you look at where you're going to go, don't look to the past. Think like a teenager, a 13-year-old. Imagine what is possible, and then develop that concept of where you want to be a number of years out. Develop your path to get there. And as basic as that sounds, that's what most of your peers will not do. You can say, all right, John, what mistakes have you made? I've made a lot. The ones that I have to watch most carefully of all is, you might say, John, you all move with tremendous speed. Isn't it you move too fast? It's not. I've always, whenever I got into trouble, moved too slow. Or I move fast without a process, that game plan behind it. You think about what's going to happen. I used to think that you could get a person who was passive-aggressive, who had their own self-interest at heart, as opposed to the company or the organization, and you can modify their behavior, and you can. But the minute they get under pressure, what do? They go back to their prior way. If you got people that just are out for themselves, not out for the betterment of the team, just like a sports team, you got to get them off. And you've got to have the courage to constantly reinvent as opposed to wait for the transitions. 10 lessons in leadership. Most important one, when you pass a bathroom before an important meeting, you go to the bathroom. First time a senior lawyer told me that at the largest law firm in Michigan. He said, "Do you understand what I just told you?" I thought about it for a minute, and I said, "Yeah, I've got it." Don't ever go into a meeting with pressure on you. Think about how do you get rid of that pressure. Don't ever go into a meeting summarizing what you did in the prior meeting. Summarize what you did in the prior meeting when you stop by the bathroom or take a moment to just think about it. And then you prepare for the next meeting. And while that sounds corny, it's one of the best advice on management I've gotten. I go into every meeting better prepared than anyone else in the room. Katie put my presentations together for every customer we met and every head of state we met. There were 3 to 5 pages briefing. I knew everything about their life, what was important to them, their jobs, their priorities. And that was for 100 visits. And I memorized every word of it prior to the meetings as we go into it. Secondly, never stop learning. That's what they teach you in West Virginia. Most of you will be trained in an area of business or engineering or IT that will be obsolete in a couple of years. You want to learn how to learn. And that's what this university does an amazing job of. Treat people the way you want to be treated. I got the job at Cisco purely because of the way I treated somebody 15 years before that made some mistakes and I helped him get out of it. And I had no idea he was even at Cisco. Silicon Valley, I had 5 job offers there. I was really proud. I was never going to get presented to Cisco. He called up my wife and said, "I've got the right job for John. Come to Cisco." Amazing how that works, isn't it? But that will occur again and again in your life and leadership. Take care of your family and friends and be there when they need you the most. Part of our culture, probably the only company in the world that does this. I know every illness of every employee, every spouse, and child is life-threatening with 70,000 people. Every day there's a challenge. But it isn't about knowing about it. We move heaven and earth. We'll get into the best experts, and miracles do happen. And if they don't happen, however, we're there also during the time they need you the most. Strong family culture. Old-fashioned, but it is powerful. It's like a sporting team. When you take us on, you take us all on. And we know we're going to beat you. Nothing personal. It's the ability to think about what you can focus and control. And this is something, Dad, that I know I need to do better on. Don't sweat the small stuff. Don't sweat the things you can't change. Stress, self-induced. It really is. And when you look at where you're going to go, take risk. And this is something I think the East Coast does not understand with the West Coast. In the West Coast, if you're a startup company with a lot of people and you failed before, as long as you got the same team and you learn from it, I'd rather invest in them than a new group that hasn't failed. You never win unless you take risk. Have the courage to take risk. And then have the courage, if it isn't working out, to either adjust, reinvent, or start again. It makes you better at what you've learned. Leadership is lonely. Unfortunately, get used to it. When things are going well, everybody is happy. They're there with you. They want to help you lead. And when things get tough, Oliver, you know what I'm talking about, you will be by yourself. And you just have to understand that. If you look at where you're going, create balance in life, because otherwise you burn out. And you want to be proud of your family as well as proud of your occupation. And have fun. I have fun almost every day. I asked President Clinton, and it kills me saying this, he's been the most effective president during my lifetime. 22.5 million jobs, 17% growth in real income per family when he was in the rate, 3.8% average GDP growth. He basically outlined simple concepts like get rid of the deficit, empower people and businesses, open markets. And he worked very closely with the business community to change the world. But when you think about it, and I asked him, he said, "I have fun every day, John." And he does. If you learned one thing from today, and one thing only, West Virginia has prepared you well. Let me open it up for questions. Who would like to ask the first question? And the first one's always a little bit slow. And if you haven't got a microphone, I'll come to you and I'll repeat the question, or I can change it if I want to within that. Yes, sir.
What are the first 3, if you identify 3 critical things that created your success over your life?
3 critical things that created my success over my life. The first one, I was lucky. I had a father who was very visionary and could always think 5, 10, 15 years out. His current focus is on water in the state, which I think is the most important asset we still have. A mother who was emotionally really strong IQ who taught me that. So my parents. Second is learning to build teams. We built teams on this campus that were unbelievably strong. Our intramural team is called W.Va. I won't tell you what it stands for. 40 years ago, we played in pink shirts. We dominated intramural all-campus sports. It's the ability to build teams. And the third thing is back to that combination of knowing when to stay the course and have the courage when everybody's criticizing you, knowing when to adjust and knowing when to reinvent. Next question, please. How did my legal education help me in the business world? I thought government was going to interfere even more than it has with business. And so I wanted to really get a good understanding of business and law together. But what law taught me more than anything else is most issues are not like a business case where you read one page and you've got all the detail. I love that about business. They give you here are the financials, here's the other issues. What law taught me is to understand a case that was 10 or 20 pages, play out the game in my head, and then apply what I learned in business back the other way. It taught me also how unique this country is. I've been in every country in the world, met with every leader in the world, and for all of our weaknesses, this is the best place in the world to be. When I ask the leaders from China and the leaders both on government and business who come to Cisco every year, we do home and away training for them, and they're getting really good, progressing almost 100% per year. And I say, why do you come to America? You're really getting much stronger. And they say, because this is where innovation is. And teaching that in our schools is hard to teach, but we're pretty good at it. So the law degree, I really, really appreciate. I also played 3 more years of basketball in the gym during that time period. Next question. Please, all the way back.
Hi, my name is Dylan Knox.
I always know when there's a question from the back of the room, you got to get close to them, otherwise you can get zinged. You want to make the eye contact with your audience, and then you go in. You're thinking, how close am I going to get? I'm going to get really close. Okay. All right, I like that. Come on. Okay.
I know you guys are in the middle of picking a successor in the company.
Yes.
And I was just curious, 2-part question.
Yes.
One is, what leadership qualities do you best look at? I know you kind of defined it in your slides a little bit, but what are the top things you look at in a leader? And also, I know I might be a little underqualified for the position.
Would you like to apply?
But yeah, I think I can grow into it.
Well, you know, it's interesting, and that last comment wasn't off the wall as much as you think. One of the 3 first wave of potential CEOs is a person who about 8 years ago, when I asked him what he wanted to do, he said, John, I want your job. And we took him from Europe, put him over top of Japan. He built an unbelievably strong culture. During the height of the recession, grew at 10%. Last year, grew almost 30%. Took all of Asia, moved across to Asia. We're now putting him over top of services. Have the courage to dream and ask for the order. It's amazing when you ask for the order, you'll at least get the objections you have to overcome. Second is, as we develop this is something as a CEO you do constantly with the board of directors. We have for 15 years had a hit by the bus program. Who would be that? As long as the person that we identified wasn't the driver of the bus when they hit me, they got the job. But you had development all the way through. And what we really did in announcing that I would stay 2 to 4 more years was let both internal and external shareholders and others know, here is our progression plan. And I'm going to move my leaders around. We're not sure who's going to get the job. And we hope that it'll be an internal candidate, but that's not a given. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take people that were salespeople, move them into engineering. Engineering, move them into services. Services people, move them into operations. And then you watch how do they do under pressure. And as corny as this sounds, I'll learn more about you under pressure in 2 months than I'll learn a year of watching you when there isn't pressure. So you basically go through a process. You determine how does that come through. This is not the CEO's decision. I'm an influencer. It's the board of directors that make it. And if I do my job right, you'll never know when the transition at CEO occurs. We've had 5 CFOs, 7 heads of sales, 4 engineering leads. You don't even notice when we make transitions. That's about smoothness if you do your job right. Next question. Please.
Cisco is a large company.
Yes.
WVU is a large university. Is there a time when things are just too large to be productive?
The question is, and it's a good one, and you want to understand that structure and size has advantages but huge disadvantages. So the question is, Cisco is pretty large, WVU is pretty large. Is there a time when size actually works against you? The answer is yes. But it isn't that one structure or the other is wrong. You have to understand, almost any organization structure works, but you've got to understand the strength of it, and you've got to understand the limitations, and you have to balance the limitations. If I'm a large organization, I've got to be able to manage my individual deals, my sales group, my engineering group, as though we were a small company, and force them to work well together. If I don't, we won't get in trouble. I mean, we will get in trouble. I know every key competitive win going on versus the startup of Arista or Silver Springs in the world. Lead it by example. So you have to understand the strength of a large organization is power, the ability to have all those products that work together. If all you do is have individual segments, you're probably better in a number of small companies. University has the same type of challenges as Jim would tell you. It's basically how do you have the critical mass that allows you to do so many things, including really preparing for the future and making a difference in the state. But understand the weaknesses is you've got to make the business school very strong, you've got to make the med school very strong, you've got to make the pharmacy school very strong, you've got to make the law school very strong. Does that make sense? Please.
Who's the most important to own in shareholders, employees?
Who's the most important opinion for you? I never dodge questions. That sometimes gets me in trouble. Your shareholders, your employees, or your customers. The most important one for me is the customer. Because if I listen to the customer, that will be we do right by the shareholders and you do right by the employees. Now, everybody says that. Very few people do. And let me tell you as a business leader, the only thing worse than asking your customers what you should do and what are you doing wrong, not asking them, is asking them and then when they tell you, don't do it. Major flaw. And Jim, I can go a little bit longer or whatever you all want at this time. One more. Where do I see the university 10 years? What I can do is I get to talk at almost any university in the world, and it's fun because young people don't change. You're in the middle of China at Tsinghua University. Professors are up front. They're nervous because the students are challenging them in new ways, social networking. Back here, we're tweeting. I can already see how I'm doing on the reports. They're challenging the group. The most important thing for this university to do is know when to change, know when to stay the course, and know when to reinvent. Secondly, it's going to be a physical and a virtual world, and that makes us all uncomfortable. I don't think virtual universities win, but I don't think physical only win either. An example of one to watch is Duke. They do both today remarkably well in the direction. Where do I see university? I think it will be the job engine creator of skill sets for this state and for the region. So with that, it's been an honor to be here today. If you've got one element that was worthwhile, I've accomplished my job. And we're also very, very proud of West Virginia, the students, and the university. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.